You're listening to the Membership Site Success Podcast, where you learn from successful entrepreneurs how to build and run a profitable membership site so that you too can generate recurring revenue for your business month after month. And now, here's your host, membership site expert, Vic Dorfman.
Nathalie, Lussier, entrepreneur queen, working hard, keen eye for design. So glad to have her on the show. Still working on my Christopher Walken, but I'm also still working on bringing awesome guests on the Membership Site Success Podcast. And today, we have a truly awesome guest in the form of Nathalie Lussier. Nathalie runs Pop-Up Ally, AmbitionAlly.com, and she has several other businesses under her subspecies. She's a very, very smart lady with a very keen eye for design, as Mr. Walken mentioned a moment earlier. And this was one of the funnest interviews I've done. And I think especially if you are a woman, but even if you're not a woman, you should listen to this interview because Nathalie does market specifically to women, although there are men in her audience and men who purchase her products as well. But it's always refreshing to get a new take on the concepts of design and appealing to the female demographic and just doing business well and consciously and honestly and ethically as well. So, Nathalie. So, the first question that I ask all my guests is, how did you get into entrepreneurship and online entrepreneurship specifically?
Yeah, so I kind of always knew I wanted to start a business. Even when I was a kid, I started making websites when I was 12. So I kind of got the tech bug pretty early.
When you were 12?
Yes, I was 12. And I designed my school's website, and I kind of was in the online space before there was much of an online space or before it was a real thing. And I ended up going to college and studying software engineering, and I was an intern on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley. So I kind of got to experience a lot of the kind of real world tech space. And I kind of realized it wasn't quite for me. So when I graduated, I had this job offer on Wall Street and I turned it down to essentially figure out what I was going to do next. And my parents were like, what are you doing? This is crazy. And all my friends were going off to jobs at like Google and Facebook, and they were going to work on Wall Street. And I just knew it wasn't quite the right path for me. So I started my first business, which I kind of consider to be my training business at this point. But I was reading a lot of blogs about, follow your passion and do what you are so passionate about. So I started a business all about healthy eating and nutrition. And I was totally self-taught in that whole space. But I knew all the tech stuff. So I built my own website. I set up all of my online marketing and my list building. All that stuff kind of came a lot more naturally to me. And so I did that, and my business started to kind of take off, and people started asking me, how are you doing this? How are you building your websites? Who built your website? How are you doing all this marketing stuff? And so that kind of led into the kind of online marketing space that I'm in right now. So that was kind of a circular way of kind of getting into the business. And now, we have software that we design, and my husband works with me in the business now. So we've kind of grown to a whole different level, and so many things have happened in between. But
you said that you had friends that went off to work in Google and Facebook. Those are pretty coveted jobs. It's like the tippy top in Silicon Valley anyway. I've lived there as well, and everyone's like, if you're not working in Twitter, Google, or Facebook, you suck. But right. So why did you feel you were different and that you had to kind of go do your own thing?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I have friends who work at Twitter, Facebook, and Google. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, wow. And definitely I felt weird not following that path and thinking like maybe there's something wrong with me. But actually I realized that I didn't really fit into those environments. I never really felt like I fit in. And maybe it was being a woman also, in the tech space. I just felt like there was something kind of deeper that I had to be doing. And when I started my business, I think that's why I was so drawn to the follow your passion stuff, because I realized like I love technology, but for some reason that context was not the right place, especially the Wall Street context, because there was like no humanness and no love on Wall Street that in my internships that I really experienced. And the people were really smart and really awesome, but, what we were actually working on was just not exciting to me. So I think that was a big part of it. And so when I started my business, I knew that I was helping people. I could see people responding to what I was doing, and that was really motivating for me.
In the nutrition area or in the tech area?
Yeah, both. And actually in the nutrition, originally, that was the first place I was like, wow, I could actually, help people. And I had gotten my dad to eat healthier, and he kind of lost weight, and he was starting to feel younger again. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can see the results of what I'm doing. And it was very similar when I switched into the tech and marketing too. I could see people who had no idea how to do things, but now suddenly they had their own website. Suddenly they had, they were building their lists and they were doing things and getting traction. So to me, that was like the biggest motivator. And then, eventually I knew I was going to make it. I knew I was going to, figure out the financial stuff eventually. But I'm definitely glad that I went down this path, because now we've kind of carved out a lifestyle that I don't think I could have had if I was working at Google or at on Wall Street. And we're starting a family, and, we moved to Texas, and we are kind of like living a little bit off the grid in a certain way. Right. So I think that's been really fun.
Yeah, you really did carve something out, because the way that I found out about you, actually, before you reached out to me, funny enough, I think like a week before that I found out about you, because one of my clients, she said, hey Vic, have you heard of this plugin Pop-Up Ally? I love it. I love everything about it. It's awesome. It's amazing. And I'm like, oh, really? And she said, yeah, I haven't bought it yet.
That's so funny.
And it was along those lines, and I said, I didn't say this, but I thought, well, how do you know you love it? And
right.
and since you brought up the female thing, and I kind of wanted to talk about this because I know you market more to women, mostly to women, right? Is that I feel that, and this is a generalization, of course, but I feel that women respond to design very viscerally. And I was talking in my mastermind group today about this, is that I have clients who use certain software, and the back end is fugly, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And even though it's super functional and does everything they want, everything is running super smoothly, they're just like, I hate it. And I say, really? Well, it's working fine. What's wrong with it? I hate it. And say, can I switch to Nathalie's thing?
Right.
So how did you sort of cultivate this this marketing, this such a compelling marketing that people want to buy your stuff almost just because? And it's good as well, I'm sure, but just
right.
because,
Yeah, you described it really well. And I think that there's something about design and about how we feel when we use something that is not just about the features. And I think that a lot of times when we're thinking about software, and I think, having gone to software engineering and gone through that process, I learned about all the tech stuff and all about the requirements gathering and all that stuff. But I think that what I learned in marketing my business is kind of that empathy piece, and that actually building things that people want to use is very different than just checking off some checkboxes to say that this plugin or this tool does these 10 things that people are looking to achieve. And I think that design is a big piece of that. I think how you feel when you're using something, and that user experience design is huge. And we do put a premium on design, I think, in our business. And I think that women appreciate that. Like, if you think about it, women like flowers, they like, pretty things. And I think that translates into the businesses that we're creating. We want to have a similar experience. And it might sound frivolous, but I actually think it's kind of like the way that I see it is that women in the marketplace are building like these beautiful websites and these beautiful apps and these beautiful things. And we're kind of like bringing men along with us. And we're like, come on over. It's pretty. It's fun.
I mean, and I think Steve Jobs didn't think it was frivolous.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly. There are definitely companies that have made design a core part of their companies and thrived because of it. So I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
And I see you have your color palette hanging there on your wall, your website color palette.
Yes, totally. It's the brand is everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. So and you've also, and I don't know if this was intentional or if this is just a part of your marketing for Pop-Up Ally, which is a really cool plugin, by the way. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that later. But you brand yourself as the sensitive marketer, or maybe I should say that you help women to become aware of being sensitive marketers? What does it mean to be a sensitive marketer? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of times when we think of marketing, we think of like really aggressive tactics and strategies and things that you need to do to like push or kind of be more present and kind of be loud. And I think that there's at least a certain segment of the marketplace that doesn't really resonate with that, where they're like, I don't want to pound my chest. I don't want to do something that feels uncomfortable for me. I just want to tell people, hey, I have great stuff. I can help you solve certain problems. You should work with me, right? And I think that there is a place for that kind of marketing, and being sensitive to me is being able to kind of feel what somebody else is feeling and kind of have that empathy and really connect with them on that level, as opposed to just like having a big red button that flashes and says, buy now or we kill this puppy, right? Which I think a lot of times, that's kind of what marketing can feel like, especially if you're new to online marketing or if you're new to creating marketing. You kind of have this vision of the mass media marketing, which is like commercials and like billboards or whatever. And then when you're trying to learn marketing yourself, it just doesn't really connect with what you're learning. So for me, being able to say you can actually be sensitive and maybe even be quiet, which I'm a total introvert. So that's why I like online business. I don't have to leave the house too often, even though I love meeting people. But that's really been helpful for me to be able to tap into what I'm good at. And sometimes that means being observant or talking to somebody one-on-one and then realizing, oh, actually, you want to buy this thing because you want this, but actually underneath that, what you're really trying to solve is this other issue or this other thing that you're aspiring to. So being able to kind of connect on those deeper levels, to me, is kind of being that sensitive marketer. And it kind of goes back into that design element that we talked about too. It's like having a good user experience is kind of part of that too.
You tapped into something really interesting, Nathalie, because I had Shane Malach from Thrive. He's actually one of your competitors now that I think about it. But super nice guy, super cool guy, very, very smart. And we kind of touched on the same topic of once you gain a certain amount of proficiency in anything, and business is no different, you start to express your personality more and more through that medium. So, you said you're introverted, you're empathetic, you're sensitive person, and that comes out in your marketing and in your products, actually. But let me ask you this. What would you say to Joe Schmo marketer who's out there, or Jane Schmo, who's out there and she says, well, I didn't want to do it, but I put a pop-up opt-in on my website and it gets more leads. So what's the deal? Why should I not beat my chest?
Yeah, and that's actually exactly why we designed Pop-Up Ally as the polite pop-up, because I think that so many times we just throw out the baby with the bathwater and we're like, oh, this tactic is too much for me. I would never do that. It would turn people off. And the same with Webinar. We actually just released Webinar Ally 2 days ago. So it's a very new product. But a lot of our audience just never got into webinars because the technology is too complicated, right? Yes. Or there's just so much going on behind the scenes and they're not sure how to do it. So we kind of want to take maybe tactics that might feel overly aggressive or too complicated or technical, and then just bring it into the everyday, like any person can actually do it. And when it comes to being annoying with pop-ups, we actually asked our people what were the things that really bugged them about them. And what we found is that pop-ups themselves work. I think, obviously everyone can kind of see the stats on that. And when you install it, you see the difference immediately. But what they were finding is that the people who were already on their email list were the ones that were getting annoyed because they were already on the list, but they still kept seeing pop-ups. And so there is a way to do that with cookies to kind of hide that. But what ends up happening is if you're visiting the website on your phone or, you're on a different device like an iPad or whatever, you don't have that cookie for the first time you opted into that list. So you're still getting the pop-up. So we actually have a way when you're using Pop-Up Ally to disable the pop-up when you're clicking a link from somebody's newsletter, because they're on the list. So why do you have to show the pop-up again to that person? So we've that was some of the stuff that we did some kind of focus group customer research on, and we found that was one of the things that was really annoying. And, to the new person who's about to come to your website or about to leave your website, to show them a pop-up is not the biggest deal, but to the person who's your loyal fan, you don't want to keep annoying them. So just kind of, it's a subtle shift, but that's the kind of thing that can make a huge difference and can actually sway somebody to install a pop-up and get the results that they're really looking for. Yeah,
that makes total sense. If I've already signed up to your list, why would I see the pop-up again? And so, But if I come from a different device and I don't come through your newsletter, let's say I just visit directly your site, then you'd have no way of knowing that I'm not supposed to see the pop-up, though. I guess there's nothing you could do about that, though.
Exactly. There's certain like technical limitations, but yeah.
Okay, but so you said that you started with a healthy eating website.
Yes.
How did you transition into building WordPress plugins and applications? And do you have any tech background to speak of?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, websites since I was 12, basic HTML coding at the time. And then in my software engineering days, lots of low level programming. So all the tech stuff was definitely kind of first language for me. And what ended up happening with the health website is that people were like, okay, who built your website? And I had built it myself. So at first I was like, no, I don't do websites. Like that was just clear. I had done my high school's website and it was just not the most fun experience to design for my high school.
Sure, it made you real popular.
Yeah, exactly. But so I had a coach at the time and she was like, you know what, you should just try it. You're so good at it. It comes natural. Just see what happens. So I said, okay, fine. I'll do a couple websites. And so I ended up doing web design for about a year. And it actually kind of took off. It became my first kind of 6-figure business. And I realized, okay, this is really good. And it's not what I'd want to do forever. So, I transitioned to more consulting at that time and people were starting to ask me about, how do you launch things and how do you actually do a marketing campaign? And so I had kind of thrown out the recurring thing from that experience, which is kind of unfortunate, but I kind of came back to it a little bit later in this kind of new iteration of my business. And I realized, yes, okay, it makes total sense to do recurring revenue. And we actually have 2 recurring revenue sources right now. So one is our Heart Quarters program, which is basically, it houses all of our digital training. So we have a new training that comes out every quarter. We have quarterly coaching, and it's kind of an online group training with just more great stuff coming out all the time. And so that's a recurring and it's a yearly recurring. So we've got people coming back year after year. And we kind of made it yearly because we wanted people to be committed for that whole time. And because we're releasing things every quarter and it's not a monthly, I kind of wanted to get away from monthly for that particular thing, mostly for myself because I don't want to feel like I'm on this content creation treadmill. That was intentional for that program. And then in terms of our software, we do have a couple of different recurring revenue sources there too. So for Pop-Up Ballet Pro, it's a one-time fee, but then if you want to keep getting updates and new templates and stuff, it's $27, year after that.
Yep.
And then for Access Allied, that is a monthly recurring. So it's $79 a month, or you can do a yearly and save 2 months. So that's also been recurring just because we're constantly adding features. And also, we assume that if you're using it for a membership site, you're probably doing some sort of recurring thing too. So it kind of like goes hand in hand as like we build, they build, and it kind of all works that way.
And do you find that once you added the recurring component to your business that you had a lot more peace of mind and, okay, now I know my cash flow roughly, now I can budget for things a little bit better?
Absolutely. And, before that, my business was definitely launch based. So every time I had a launch, it would be like peaks and valleys, right?
Yeah.
So that was definitely interesting.
That's a treadmill too.
It is. Absolutely.
It's a big one, but
when's the next launch, right? That's always the question.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about definitely is the fact that you, and correct me if I'm wrong here because maybe you speak to men as well tangentially, but I'm assuming that in your marketing, your target audience is women. Yeah.
So when we write our copy and when we think about our products, usually it's 70-30, so 70% women, 30% men. And the men that we tend to attract are not your average marketer, so they can be, maybe they're a little bit more sensitive, or maybe they're in the health space, or, they're into yoga, or like there's something that kind of makes them a little bit different from like certain guys, I guess.
Is there a reason that you chose specifically to work with women as opposed to the whole market?
I think that, it definitely kind of came out of my experience.
I just feel excluded. That's all.
No, you're definitely not excluded by any means. And actually, now that we're into software, we do have a lot more men who are buying the software. But I think when I was doing training, it was majority women, just because what I found is that you could either, I don't know, it's kind of a different space. So when you're learning something technical, if you're a woman, you kind of feel silly asking questions if you're in a not very safe environment. And I kind of felt that too when I was doing software engineering. You know, there was 100 guys in my class and 10 girls. So it was definitely a bit of a kind of weird place to be. And when I graduated and started my business, originally, you know, the health space, I definitely had a lot of women come in, you know, who wanted to lose weight or whatever. So that kind of attracted female audience in the beginning. But then when I was teaching tech stuff, the way that I was teaching it was a very kind of gentle, like, you know, don't feel bad if you don't know how to do this. Like, you know, I will totally take you by the hand and walk you through it. And I think that just attracted a lot of women just naturally. And then, you know, I kind of liked it. I was like, okay, these women are really nice. They're really fun to do business with. You know, they're not angry when they can't figure something out. So now that we're doing support for software, we've noticed a stark difference sometimes when we get support tickets where a woman who doesn't know how to do something, she'll say, oh, I don't know how to figure out this little piece of the plugin or whatever. Whereas a guy's like, your plugin is broken, fix it. and sometimes that's a total, again, you know, generalization. But we've kind of felt this difference. So we like to work with fun people and people who are really positive. So I think that's kind of more of who we're actually targeting, but it does tend to bring a lot of women because of that reason.
and do you feel like there are certain pros and cons to working with this segment of the market?
I don't know if there's any real pros and cons. Like kind of what we mentioned earlier is I feel like sometimes we're ahead of the curve in terms of design, or we have to stay ahead of the curve in terms of design, and not focus as much on just like the features. But other than that, I think it's also, it's a bit tricky because we talk about this as women, and sometimes women's businesses aren't as successful in the early days because we're either, you know, juggling families or other obligations or elderly parents, or like there's kind of a lot of things that we're doing outside of just growing our businesses. So sometimes there is that, what can feel like it's not going as quickly as if you're a guy. And, you know, I don't know if this is true for all women, but there's definitely this kind of feeling sometimes in the women's space. So, just not taking things on and being so hard on yourself is really kind of what we've noticed is important for women, just because they're probably not, you know, 100% they're full-time dedicated to their businesses sometimes. And that's why they get into business a lot of times, is to kind of have a better lifestyle so they can be with their kids, or they can, you know, help support other things in their life. So it's a little bit different in that way. And they also tend to be very ambitious and driven, just like guys, but that tends to look a little bit different in the reality of their world.
Absolutely. I think, the more that you can actually recognize the differences between men and women, the more effectively you could help both of them, rather than creating an artificial divide. But I want to back up for a quick moment and ask you about design, okay? Because you touched on this, and we touched on Steve Jobs, and I think it's a really overlooked component. It's overlooked on my site for sure, because it's kind of a functional site, you could say. And can you just give me maybe your top 2, you know, design principles for someone who's as retarded as I am about this topic?
Well, there's a great book by a friend of mine, David Kadavi, which is Design for Hackers. So, and he also has an online course and stuff. So even just reading his blog has really cool tips. And it's funny because my husband is very similar. He's like, what font? How does that make any difference? What color? It doesn't matter. Like, he really is not a huge design fan, but he's also noticed the difference when something is well designed. So it's kind of funny how, if you're coming from more of the functional background, design is just not super, you know, natural to you or whatever, but you can definitely learn it. So, some of the things I think are really important are, kind of like hierarchy of information. So if you're coming to a website or reading it can be print, whatever it is, you want to know exactly where your eyes should go right away when you land there. So whether it's your headline needs to be bigger than your text, or if you have something that you really want people to pay attention to, like an opt-in or a buy now button, it kind of has to pop out at you and in the right order. So you don't want necessarily your buy now button to be read before the headline. So there are certain things that you want to do in that way so that it feels like it kind of flows from one place to another. And you kind of want to guide people's eyes using design elements. So that can be the size of the font or the colors, or it can be the spacing around things so that people don't get confused about where they should go next. So that's a really big thing. And that, you know, applies to anything that you're really designing. It could be the software that you're designing. It could be a print material, a poster, or even a video, just so that you know where your eyes should go first. And then the other thing that I think is really important is white space. So a lot of times, we try to like fit everything into one little screen as much as we can. And sometimes we think, scrolling is bad, but actually having a lot of space in between things just kind of gives your eye some space to pause and to actually take in the information, so it's not so overwhelming. So I think that's another thing. And you can do that with images or with other things, with other design elements. And I think that's really big. So I learned a lot of that from my designer friends and my photographer friends when they're kind of framing things. They don't try to fit as much as they can in one area. They kind of leave some space, and that actually makes you appreciate what you're seeing more.
I agree. Space is really important in any art, in music. And one thing I noticed is that you are big on video in your content. And what I want to ask is, what role does content marketing play in your business, and specifically video, if you could touch on that too?
Yeah, so we started doing videos a couple of years ago as a way to kind of connect more with my tribe. And I realized that I wanted to do video, and actually did video in my raw food business, like way back in the day, just with recipes in the kitchen doing demos. And actually the YouTube side of things really took off, and that kind of helped grow that business in the first place, because people who are searching for recipes on YouTube will find those videos, and then they'll kind of subscribe or click back to your site. So there's a lot of organic traffic that you can get from being on video that you might not get from just posting a recipe on a blog. So that kind of came early, but then it kind of resurfaced in this business when I realized, okay, I can actually do this in a much higher production value kind of way. And I was able to kind of come up with topics that really resonated with my audience. And I think that made a big difference in them sharing those videos, watching those videos, subscribing to the channel, and just, having that ongoing thing that we could connect every week on that video. And it's interesting because I really think that video made a big difference, especially in terms of marketing my programs. So people started to get to know me. And then when you have like a pre-launch coming up with a video, and they're used to watching video already, it's much easier to get them to kind of participate and share all that content for you. So I think that video on a regular basis is really important, but also if you're doing some sort of marketing campaign, it can be even more powerful.
And do you have some sort of content marketing strategy? Is there a method to the madness, or do you just sort of think of topics, write blog posts? Is it scattered? What's the approach?
Sometimes it'll just be inspiration. So I have an idea and I'm like, oh, this would be a good one. But a lot of times my topics come from just being very present with my people. So in my Facebook groups, I see what comes up over and over again. And that's where I really get some of my best, most popular topics is, answering questions of people who are just saying like, oh my God, I always seem to run into this problem, or like, how do you deal with this, with your husband or with your kids, or, whatever it is that's going on with them. And so that's been really helpful. And that's actually how I come up with a lot of my blog post topics, podcast topics, just like all that kind of comes from the community. And I think that's been a big piece of what's worked. So I just had a really popular blog post called The Reverse Opt-in. And it was all about how people were kind of sick of doing the squeeze page and the pop-up and all that stuff. And I was like, sometimes you can actually just give your gift thing away and then ask for the opt-in as a second step. And people just went bananas because it was a recurring theme that I had seen in our Facebook group. So people who were like, there must be another way. Like, do I really have to do these things that I'm told to do all the time? And I think that being able to resonate so deeply because you're connected to that audience already makes it so much more powerful.
That's very interesting. And I imagine that certain industries respond better to that kind of marketing than others.
It could be, yeah.
Like maybe the raw food crowd, or meditation crowd, like people who don't like getting in your face marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think also we think about that a lot more because we're in the marketing space, right? So we think about squeeze and opt-ins and all these things all the time. And so of course we get sick of it. But the people who are actually on the receiving end of that marketing, if they're not in the marketing space, they're probably, not so much aware of it, but also if you give them free stuff and then ask for the opt-in, they're probably excited anyway. So that's going to work for sure.
Well, since you brought it up, you work with your husband.
Yes.
What is that like? What are the challenges inherent in that and the benefits inherent in that?
Yeah, so one of the main benefits that we found is that we actually get to spend quality time together. So when he was working his full-time job, we were living in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and he was, commuting to Manhattan every single day, and I would basically not see him. He would sometimes come home at like 11 or 12 and then go back out at 7 or 8 in the morning. So there was really not a whole lot of quality time. And then on the weekends, he just needed to decompress. So now we actually get to spend time together as a couple, but also in the business, we get excited. So before he joined the company, I used to get excited about my business and talk about all these ideas and all these projects and things. And he'd be like, I don't want to talk about work. But now, because we're kind of on the same team, we can talk about things and get excited about projects and come up with ideas together. And so we're just kind of more passionate in like our career side of things together. But it's not without its challenges. Definitely there's been learnings from both of our sides of how we like to communicate. So we're both kind of type A people, and we sometimes kind of can direct each other or give each other commands that don't come off feeling very loving. So we've actually come up with a couple of rules. One of them is the because rule. So if you're going to tell the other person what to do, you have to give them a reason why. So it's like, oh, can you update this page because we need to get this thing fixed, or, whatever. And then that way it kind of softens the command a little bit and it gives them more context.
Okay, you know what you just reminded me of, Natalie? Have you read the book Persuasion by Robert Cialdini?
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yes, I have.
So
yep.
So there's this study. I'm sure you know what I'm going to say, where there's this guy who was trying to cut in line to make a copy at a copy machine.
Yes,
and
I remember that.
so he asked these people, can I cut? And most of them said no. And then he said, can I cut? Because, and he inserted some completely preposterous reason that didn't have anything to do with, but just because he said because and gave a reason, people said, oh yeah, sure, no problem. but I could see how that would soften the blow for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's been really nice. And, just like little tweaks and tips that we've learned along the way have made a big difference. But then also we have weekends are completely non-business talk. So that's been really good to kind of have that separation. And then, it's funny because I say that he was working crazy hours before he quit his job. And now we do work a lot, in different times, if we're launching a new software or whatever, we are working crazy hours too. So it's not to say that it's so much easier, but at least, we don't have to commute and he can just, work in his pajamas and kind of hang out. So that's kind of nice.
Well, you said that on the weekends, you're not really dealing with business too much. Do you have, and I like to ask this of my guests, actually, I had my buddy Jake Poole here, and he was talking about his sort of rituals for what do you do to recharge so that when you come back to business, you're at 100%, you're firing on all cylinders. How do you do that day to day or on the weekends or vacations, etc.?
Yeah, that's been huge. So I'm a huge fan of getting massages and, yoga, and we take walks in our neighborhood every single night. And that's been really, really good to just decompress and, catch up on the day's events. But on the weekends, I basically do not check email, do not check Facebook, do not check any kind of online stuff. And sometimes, we'll kind of do projects around the house, or we'll just read, or like do nothing, go swimming, or just kind of keep it simple. But yeah, I think that actually just disconnecting and unplugging from thinking about my business is huge. So even if I'm reading on the weekends, I try to make it not business related, because if I read a business book, then my brain just goes into business mode and it's not really downtime. So that's been really huge, and it's not easy. I've been doing it for about maybe 6 months or so at this point. But it's made a huge difference. And then when I get into work on Monday, even though it's in my house, it's still like I'm fresh and I can really focus on like the top priorities. So that's been nice.
Yeah, and you kind of deprive yourself of the thing that you love to do, so that when it's Sunday and you're like, okay, one more day and then I can get back to it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Absolutely.
Very cool. So, okay, just a few more questions. I think we've touched on a lot of really good stuff. And I wanted to ask you what kind of apps and maybe processes you implement in your business to help things run smooth. You said you have a developer. It's you, your husband, and then one other person. Is it a four-person team at the moment?
So we have myself, my husband, another developer, a full-time project manager, a marketing assistant, and then we have somebody in the Philippines who does video and audio editing. So
cool. So 6 people.
6, yeah.
Okay.
And then we collaborate with designers and freelancers and other people.
Sure. Okay. So
yeah. So yeah, absolutely. We use a lot of stuff to keep our business running. So one of my favorite tools is Asana. It's a totally free project management tool. They actually just came out with a new design, which is kind of pink and candy, but we love it. So it definitely, Robin was like, my husband was like, oh no, it's not blue anymore. Why did they change the design? And all the girls on my team were like, yay, it's awesome. So going back to that design matters thing is pretty cool. But yeah, so we use that to organize all of our projects. And we do a couple of different things. So because our team is virtual, we have people all over the world. We have a daily stand-up meeting. So it's just a 5-minute phone call meeting where everybody says what they're working on. We go over the stats of the company. So like daily sales or kind of traffic or whatever we're working on at the time. And then if there's anything that people are stuck on or if they have questions, we just try to address it just that at one time. And then that way everybody knows what everybody's doing. So it's much easier than being like, who do I ask about this thing? We always know who's working on what. And we also use Slack for chat communication between everybody. And then also we have a wiki in using Confluence. So Confluence is a company or a tool by Atlassian. And it's kind of a bit of a beast because it's not always up to date, but we try to kind of go in there and put our step-by-step things that we do every week or things that kind of recur. And then we also keep as much data in there as possible, like, FAQs or testimonials that come in or screenshots of people's pop-ups that we like or, that they're built using Pop-Up Ally or whatever it is. So we try to just keep and centralize all that information there so that if somebody has a question, check Confluence. And we definitely do have a lot of processes and systems of like, okay, step 1, do this. And when you're editing the podcast, where do you upload it? Here, and all that stuff. So that's been huge as we've grown and added more people to the team.
Very cool. As I've spoken with different business owners, especially this weekend, there's just a ton of business people here. Everybody who's doing well in their business has lots of documented processes, or I should say lots of documentation, lots of processes, standard operating procedures, organized step-by-step checklist, work the system type methodology pervading their business philosophy. And it's also starting to rub off on me because in the book, Work the System, the author is basically saying that it's not when your business gets to a certain point that you need to start documenting. Your business gets to that certain point as a consequence of you doing that stuff and not working on the little, niggling things in your business.
Yeah.
So I just want to really reiterate that point. It's huge for me now.
Yeah, I love that book, the Work the System book. It also taught me that systems are not just for business. So going back to working with my husband, we actually came up with a really simple system that's so like first world problem. It's not even like a joke, but basically with our dishwasher, we never knew if the dishes were clean or dirty. So we put a little piece of paper with a magnet that says dirty or clean so that after you do the dishes, you just flip it to clean so that when it comes out, you're ready to empty the dishwasher. And that is like, it saved us from arguing about who's doing the dishes and, who's loading it up or when's the last time you loaded it up. And it's just systems thinking, but at play in personal life and in business can make such a big difference and just remove friction, right? Which I think is nice.
Unless you enjoy fighting with your spouse.
Well, I don't think anybody enjoys that.
I don't know. Some people get off on the drama.
I guess, but there's better ways to be dramatic. I mean,
yeah, agreed.
Than dishwashers.
Okay, so Nathalie, what's the kind of number one takeaway, piece of super generic advice that you want to give the audience?
Yeah, I think touching on kind of what we covered today, really speaking to the people that you want to speak to and meeting them where they're at, I think is the big big thing for all of us. So just going back to an example in my healthy eating business, when I first got started, I was writing a lot of blog posts and videos and content to other people who are already in the space, who are already eating healthy, and using kind of lingo and jargon and stuff that they already knew. And when I realized that the people I really want to help were people who didn't even know how to open an avocado or, how to make a salad dressing themselves, because that was me before I started eating healthy. Like, I had never seen an avocado. I grew up like in a small Canadian town. We just didn't have a whole lot of different fruits and vegetables like that. So for me to actually make a blog post of like what to do with an avocado, how to open it, how to make guacamole or how to make a salad with it, when I was able to meet the people I want to help where they were at, they were able to connect with my content and with my information so much more easily, and then say yes when I had products and offerings that actually fit them. So, that's just a very concrete example, but no matter what business you're in, I think there's ways for us to actually find out where our people are at and then take them from where they're at to where they want to go.
So meet people where they're at.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me at ambitionally.com. You'll find my husband and I's software there. We've got 3 different products right now. We've got another one coming out before the end of the year. So if you have Infusionsoft or Ontraport for your membership site, we've got Access Ally there, Pop-Up Ally for anybody, and Webinar Ally for anybody who has WordPress. So those are the 3 that are out there now. And then if you want to do more list building stuff, one of our very popular tools is a 30-day list building challenge. It's totally free. You just go to 30daylistbuildingchallenge.com to sign up, and you get 1 video a day for 30 days. And people love the program, and they're like, wow, this is better than some of the paid training I've taken on list building. So definitely check that out. And you can also find my blog and my podcast and my videos at natalielussier.com.
Okay, and I will link to all of those good things, all that good stuff in the show notes. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. That was a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks for having me, Vic. This is awesome.
Wasn't that scrumptious? Thanks for listening to the Membership Site Success Podcast with membership site expert Vic Dorfman. For oodles of free tips, tricks, and tutorials on crushing it with recurring revenue, go to www.vicdorfman.com. It's what all the cool kids do, and you do want to be cool, don't you? See you next time.